All right, we're back. Dynasty Trades in 5. I'm Clay.
I'm Shane.
I'm Scott. We're going to talk about the Hock.
Yes, we are. We ran a Twitter poll, and Hockenson won it. So we're men of the people, or at least we play him on YouTube. So yeah, let's get started. Shane, you are up, sir.
I am not a man of the people. I just want to put that out there. I don't like the people. The people annoy me. TJ Hockenson, what a disappointment, right? You expected him to take a giant leap in year 3. He'd averaged 11 points per game in his sophomore season. I know some people, me, we're talking about he probably was going to be a top 3 or top 4 tight end. It seemed to line up for it, right? You got him Jared Goff, who loves targeting tight ends, or at least loved targeting tight ends in his time in Los Angeles. You didn't have much in the way of target competition. Apparently, Amon-Ra St. Brown and DeAndre Swift. There was no reason to think that Hockenson wasn't going to smash this year unless you just didn't believe in Hockenson as a talent and thought, like just because he had the perfect opportunity didn't mean he was going to smash. And if that's what you thought, it looks like you were right last year. So there's 2 ways to look at this. You could just ignore what happened this year, like I'm going to do, and then continue to lean on his athleticism, which is sublime, and his college production, which was very good. In his first 2 years, he was pretty good, and go, you know what? Again, progression's not always a linear thing. Sometimes you take a step back, and then you come back, and this is one of those players I'm going to buy the dip on. So I know he's going to have a lot of hate pointed at him this year in the offseason. And what I guess I didn't want to admit is maybe Hockenson would have benefited from a real wide receiver, a dangerous wide receiver on the outside that could have taken some of the coverage away. But all that said, I'm still in on Hockenson.
Yeah, he's a little bit of a tougher evaluation for me only because it's hard to kind of get past what he was being valued at before the season. I mean, people had him ahead of Kittle inside that elite tier to where it was like, he's going to smash until they get a real quarterback or they get an actually good offense. And then he's so good that he's going to have to smash if he gets a really good quarterback and a good offense. So it's almost like he was seen as not bulletproof, but he was seen as like the safest of the up and coming tight ends. And then, he comes out. He did deal with injuries, so I'll give him a little bit of a pass for like the second half of the season. And if you look at his usage early on in the year, he was one of those 7 or 8 tight ends in the league that was up there above that threshold. It's usually around 80% in terms of the routes run per drop back. So, I mean, he's getting elite usage. And I think there was only 7 other tight ends that average more targets per game than Hockenson. So I think you can probably check off the boxes that he is a really good tight end. I think the question now becomes just with the same thing we talked about with some of the other evaluations on tight ends is what does the elite tier look like? And who are you willing to go out on a limb and say, obviously you have Pitts, obviously you have Andrews, then you probably have, most people are going to say Kittle, but then there's kind of a break. And who is in that second tier for you? And how do you navigate that tier from a value standpoint? We talked about Waller. We've talked about Kelsey. We've talked about Hockenson now. Yeah, Goddard, same thing. So I think it just becomes like you're trying to probably target. I think that's a good tier to target next year because it's going to be a little bit of a cheaper tier. That's the tier where you can probably pivot off of like Mark Andrews and get a Hockenson plus or a Waller plus, and you could probably win that deal if things flip a year from now, like how they did this year. Easily you could see a scenario where Hockenson and Waller outperform Andrews in the next upcoming season. Like that's in the range of outcomes. So I think that's where you have to make the bet. But I guess the question now becomes, are you willing to pivot off of Hockenson and his elite pedigree and his elite profile for a lesser tight end and sell down and just bet on the fact that, okay, this guy, if he's just tight end 7 going forward, that's meaningless. Doesn't mean much. You know what I mean? There's other guys I can probably replace much closer to his, 12 points per game this year than, what I'm getting from the tight end 13, tight end 14. I can get a Dawson Knox and a first or something like that for Hockenson. And I smash that deal. And I may have the better tight end in the short term too.
Okay, if you were selling Hockenson, what would you need on top of Freiermuth?
I think there's people that would prefer Freiermuth equal to Hockenson. Quite frankly, I think they're very similar. Actually, I actually think they're in a very similar bucket to where I don't know if you can even get the. I think this is a cop out. I'd take whatever of the two I can get the plus, the extra second, the extra player, whatever it is. I mean, I would take that side all day.
Would you rather have a Hockenson or let's call it the 2022 208 and a 23 first?
It's always the first.
Yeah, I think that the 208 might be. It's nice to have if you have it, but what are you looking if you have the 208? What are you trying to do? Package it in a deal that gets you one big strong piece, which is probably the 23 first. So I think that's exactly how you would try to use that 208. I like the first.
Same thing, 1.5 tight end premium. Would you rather have the 108 or Hockenson?
What was the premium?
Pick
1.5.
Give me the 108.
Man, I'm probably taking the 108.
Would you rather have Hockenson and the 106 or Kyle Pitts?
Oh, Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, Pitts.
Hockenson and the 104 or Kyle Pitts?
I mean, in this case, I'm still taking Pitts.
I mean, that's closer. I think if I'm in the mix to get I get my choice of the wide receiver 1 or the running back 1, I don't hate that move. But again, the fact that it's even hard to pivot off of Pitts for that price just kind of shows you probably how much the market still undervalue Pitts.